Good morning and welcome back to News 3 Sunday Morning. Now this week our Sunday conversation is going to look a little different with WRBL's Chuck Williams. This weekend is all about Memorial Day.
It is, Hannah. And we talked to Jeff Mellinger and Kurt Arnold. They're retired command sergeant majors. And they're talking to us about service and sacrifice, and they know a little bit about it. Jeff, Kurt, thanks for being here. Between the two of y'all, there's almost 70 years of U.S. Army service. How long were you in, Jeff?
A little over 3 months shy of 40 years.
And for myself, about 29 years, a month, and about 6 days. So
That's a long time. That's a lot. 70 years of U.S. Army service, both retired command sergeant majors. Jeff, I'm going to start with you. What does Memorial Day mean to you?
To me, Memorial Day is a single day out of the year that is specifically dedicated to remembering and honoring those that fell in combat or died of their wounds. I don't think that any of us that have ever served go a day without thinking about them, but really Memorial Day is a day to focus on them and the contributions they made and the sacrifices they made.
What about you, Kurt?
yeah, much like Jeff, I'm the same way. I think it's for me, it is the one single day that has been identified on the calendar. But every day is Memorial Day, right? So I think often of kids that I've served with, kids that we lost both in and out of theater, because a lot of folks, their battle doesn't end in Afghanistan or Iraq; it ended back home. And so I take that opportunity to remember them. I like to remind people of their service and remind people of why we are all here and we're all free, because of folks who are greater than us and laid down their life for us.
I never served, but when I look at people like y'all that did serve, you understand Memorial Day on a level that a civilian who's never been worn uniform does. How do you talk to people that haven't served and explain what that sacrifice means?
I try and do it by explaining or relating a story involving those sacrifices that people can understand. They may not understand the awards and the decorations, but they can certainly understand when somebody willingly, knowingly does something that puts their own life at risk and pays with their life for it, either heroically or otherwise, or that they die of wounds. Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cash didn't die on the day he was wounded. He died of burns a couple weeks later in a hospital. So, it's those kinds of soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen that we think of specifically on this day and try and remember and honor.
Alwyn Cash received the Medal of Honor recently for he kept going back into a burning, was it a Humvee or was it a Bradley? He kept going back into a burning Bradley to pull soldiers out. What kind of person does that?
So I'll tell you, the kind of person that does that is a United States Army soldier or sailor, airman, Marine. It's someone who has a greater sense of worth to country and others than themselves. It's someone who loves others more than they love themselves, and some of that is ingrained, through training, through, unit camaraderie. You spend so much time together. You really can get closer to your soldiers than you are to your family, because you experience things with your soldiers and your fellow service member that you'll never experience with your family. And so you've got that love. It's just you see them hurting, you see them in danger, you want to save them, you want to protect them. But guess what? They want to do the same thing for you. I've seen so many kids, acts of valor that would just absolutely blow your mind. Things that make no sense. Running back into a burning vehicle over and over again to save your fellow soldier, knowing at some point he's on fire. This guy's dying. He knows he's dying, but he does it over and over again. That's love.
That's courage. That's unfathomable courage to somebody like me that hasn't been in a war zone.
But for everyone like Alwyn Cash or Audie Murphy or the names that people know, there's 10,000 more that just did their duty.
Amen.
And they died or were severely wounded and died of their wounds as a result of it. And that's what that day, Memorial Day, is all about, is to honor them and remember them and to make sure that their memory and their lives and their legacy doesn't fade.
I'll start with you, Jeff. Is there any one person that jumps this Memorial Day, that any one person who gave the ultimate sacrifice that's kind of in your thoughts right now?
I mean, there are so many, literally, as Kurt said. I mean, it's not just an each and an only, it's dozens and dozens and dozens. And, we could sit here for a while and name names, but one that I think about probably as much as others was a young Marine, Sergeant Brian Dunlap, who was killed on 24 September 2005. He had been training an Iraqi infantry unit. Him and his Marine unit had been training them, and they were out doing a foot patrol in a neighboring village, and hit an IED walking. I say hit an IED. An IED detonated near them. As they began to maneuver, a second IED went off, and that's the one that blew Sergeant Dunlap into a lot of pieces. And me and my patrol, along with the SEAL team, responded to that incident, and we spent the next couple of hours walking and looking, trying to find every last part of Sergeant Dunlap that we could find. I think of him often.
That, I mean, literally picking up the pieces of a Marine. I mean,
Yeah, so yeah, like Jeff, at that time, Jeff, when he was in MNFI CSM, Iraq was a real busy place, and there was a lot of folks getting killed every month. I was on a spit team then. He was actually my sergeant major then too, and but it was common. You'd roll up on, we ran these small patrols. I had 2 trucks and 4 guys, and we're going all over everywhere, and alone and unafraid. But rolled up on more IED incidents than I could possibly imagine, and fortunate in our regard, my team, we were like the luckiest unlucky guys ever, because we'd hit these doggone things, but no one ever got hurt, until we ended up having one of our young captains lose an arm and a leg. Our luck finally ran out. But I think often of guys like, when I was a first sergeant years ago, I had a kid named Jason Payton, a kid from San Diego, California, who had the most infectious smile and laughter. This kid was he was the typical blonde-haired, blue-eyed surfer boy from California. Me being, of course, from Florida, we had a little bit of a rivalry. He was my gunner, so we would always give each other a hard time about where the best waves were, Florida or California. And I'd actually, yeah, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, and so I'd actually just left to go to the Sergeant's Major Academy, and I get word says, the scout platoon was in a helicopter crash last night, and so 10 of them went down, and Jason Payton was one of those kids, And if you'd met him, I'm telling you, he'd have us all rolling right now, because he'd be giving us all, he'd be calling Jeff and I old men, and probably call you an old man too. But yeah, I think about that kid every day.
what y'all are saying is these are normal people. These are people that have chosen, volunteered, but at the end of the day, they're from California, they're from Florida, they're from Oregon, like you, Jeff. They're from everywhere. They're just normal people who have decided that they're willing to sacrifice everything for the good of a country. That's what Memorial Day is about, right? I mean, that's to look at these. Do you think the fact that we live here in Columbus, right next to Fort Moore, that we have an advantage some other towns and communities don't have, because they don't have people like y'all as neighbors? We don't have these guys as our men and women, as our Little League coaches and stuff. Do you think Columbus is uniquely situated to appreciate the service and the sacrifice?
I think any city or town that is adjacent to a military base probably looks at their military members differently than towns and cities that aren't near, because they have daily reminders. They see them shopping, they see them driving in their cars, they read about them in the newspaper, they see them on the evening news.
They see their wife or their husband when they're
You
deployed.
know, so they're
They
all
visit
around,
them,
and
they visit their fallen at the cemeteries that they live in.
so, you know, I think anybody that lives probably within 50 miles of Fort Moore has some appreciation for what goes on here. And, you know, I think there is a bit of a tie to that community, because, you know, these soldiers here go out and spend their money in the local community. So they see them at restaurants, and they see them at car shops, and they see them in furniture stores. So I think there's a pretty good tie here.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting toward the end of this, and last question I want to ask is, the guys like y'all that I know that like you recited a date specific that one of the soldiers passed away, Memorial Day as well, or anniversaries of those things, that people like you will raise a glass that day. You'll get a shot, and it's usually Jack Daniels. I've never understood why it was Jack Daniels, but there's a shot to remember. Will each of y'all raise a shot on Monday?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I probably will. I usually do, and it's a private thing.
Yep.
You know, if you look at that memorial behind us for the global war on terrorism, there's 7,058 names on those walls. 7,058.
Yeah.
And both of y'all knew a chunk of those names, didn't you?
Yeah, 19 of my former soldiers are on that wall.
Yeah, and my time as the multinational force Iraq Sergeant Major, 2,614 of those died on my watch. We think about them, and we'll think about them on Memorial Day. And that's what that day is about, to make sure that we never forget what they did for us.
Yeah.
Jeff, Kurt, thanks for being with us. I mean, your perspective of this weekend and this day is incredibly important. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for honoring our guys, you know, because like you said, that really what it comes down to, Chuck, is that it's one day, but it's every day, you know, it really is. And you know, I admire him more than he knows, because Jeff Mellinger, CSM Mellinger, does a better job of remembering all of our fallen. He does a better job of honoring all our fallen than probably all the rest of us combined. And he inspires me through that. And that's, you know, it helps you to remember them, but, you know, it's just, you know, it's emotional, you know, because it's your guys, it's your kids.
Let me ask one last question. Do y'all ever, as you walk around and live your lives now, and I know y'all both got scars from battles, do you ever say, why me? How did I survive?
all the
Right.
time, you know,
Yeah,
all the
right.
time. I mean, every time the smoke would clear after something, you know, you kind of take stock of the situation, and you see who's where and what shape they're in, and you know, when you have time, you don't have time then, but later when you do have time, I think it's natural to wonder, why them and not us? Why him and not me? Why none of us? When somebody else could have been in an identical situation and not walked away.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to scratch your head and just wonder, and be thankful that we are in a place that we can live a life that we can honor these people back here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way. I often think back to early day in October of 2006. We, as you know, the Spaghetti Bowl. It's an intersection of two major highways there in Baghdad. Rolled up on a convoy that had broken down, and had no communications. The radios weren't working. You know, we rolled two trucks. You know, and everybody thought we were these cowboys out there. You know, like, you know, what are these four guys doing out here by themselves? You know, but rolled up there, and we pulled up next to the lead truck, and I'm talking to, you know, the convoy commander. He's telling me, hey, you got an issue here. You know, truck broke down, got no commo. Okay, well, let's get your radio set. You know, and as we're working on that, his other Humvee right in front of me, there's a kid gunning the truck named Satyan Greenlee. young PFC, 431 polar bears out of Fort Drum. They had just gotten in country, and Baghdad sniper shot him right through the temple. And so my medic and I, were working on this kid, and we threw him in my truck and go straight down to the cache, and he didn't survive. And I've often thought about, like, wow, of all of us that were out there, why that kid? Why was he the one that was picked? Why not me? I said, I'm a grown man. I've got my life. I've lived it. This is a, 24-year-old young man, and so, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that it does cross your mind, and you do think about them often. So,
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Well, Chuck, you just wrapped up a very timely and appropriate Sunday conversation. Right now we're at the National Infantry Museum, where there are more than 7,000 names of soldiers behind us that were lost.
There are, Hannah. It was a very sobering conversation for me. Each one of these names has a story, and you and I are all about telling those stories. I have special thanks to Command Sergeant Majors Arnold and Mellinger for sharing their stories. They know these guys and they know their sacrifice.
Well, those of you at home, we invite you this Memorial Day to remember all the sacrifices that were made for our freedoms that we exercise every day. And we hope you join us back here on News 3 in just 2 minutes.